Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Sagacity. Today I have here with me Anahita Amirpour from Karolinska Institute in Sweden. She's a PhD candidate in medical sciences. Anahita, welcome to Sagacity. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. Let's start by telling our audience what your research is focusing on and what the specific focus of the PhD is.
Yeah, sure. So my PhD project focuses on neurocognitive recovery after surgery and neurocognitive disorders after surgery in older adults. So that's mainly the population that I study. And the type of surgery is orthopedic surgery, hip replacement, and abdominal surgery, mainly colorectal surgery.
Could you tell us a little bit about what specifically you're focusing on in your thesis, if you are able to share that with us?
Well, I'm mainly focusing on and interested in how objective measurements of neurocognition differs from subjective reports of neurocognitive decline. So I have that kind of intersection in my thesis. So I do both quantitative research and qualitative and mixed methods. So I'm trying out different type of research methods in the same thesis, you could say, which has been a challenge, but also very fun to learn different methods at the same time.
I got what you meant. For our audience, people who are not familiar with, scientific terms like quantitative methods and mixed methods, could you give us an example and sort of quickly explain what that means in lay terms so everyone can understand what we're talking?
Yeah, sure. So, well, if I explain it in a way that is easy to follow, is we're not really looking for one way to measure objectivity or truth in our patients. So we're interested in monitoring and exploring different perceptions of cognitive recovery, basically. So we do, traditional neurocognitive tests, but we also combine that with interviews where we meet the patients after their surgery and ask them how their neurocognitive recovery is going. And we ask questions about, how they are recovering, going back to their daily activities in their everyday life, if there has been any impact with their independency, or maybe they are noticing any issues with their memory function or attentional problems and so on. So we get a very nuanced and in-depth picture of that if we compare with, just doing a test where you just get some numbers afterwards.
If you could explain to us what the contribution of your research to the field and the society at large is in simple terms, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, well, I think if we look at the population in general, everyone is getting older, and it doesn't look like we're that kind of rate of high age is going to decline in the future, but people are going to continue aging. And when people age, we get a higher risk of developing different type of cognitive disorders due to age, but also pathologies like Alzheimer's and all the other types of dementia. And one of the biggest patient groups that undergo surgeries are older adults. So that will also impact perioperative medicine, meaning those who are undergoing anesthesia and surgery for a lot of different procedures. So I think it's important to understand the patient group in this complex way, but also making or creating interventions and also support for these patients because they have a much more complex way of living, and many older adults have a lot of diseases at the same time. Many are frail, or they have what we call multimorbidities. Maybe they have hypertension, high blood pressure at the same time as they maybe had a vascular disease. This all impacts their, independency and so on in their daily life. So I think that's why I find the project very important, and not only for the specific niche field in perioperative medicine, but also society in general, because we are old everywhere.
Yeah, all of us are going to get there, and
Yeah.
there's some kind of benefit to all of us with this research. I want to talk a little bit about how you got here. Tell us about what previous experiences you had in the field before getting to this phase of pursuing a PhD.
Yeah, so I have a long clinical background before transitioning to academia. I started working as a registered nurse in 2011. and I got my specialist degree in anesthesia in 2019 or 18. No, 18. So that's where my background is coming from. I was, the past few years working in the OR operation room. So that's where I come from mainly.
So what drove you to make that switch to academia or get into academia and look into this area of research more closely?
I think what initially drove me was wanting to learn more and curiosity and developing new skills and understanding different types of, problems at more depth level. I mean, when you work clinically, we meet the patients, but it's for a very short time, especially when they are under anesthesia. It's a very short period of time, and then they get discharged or they go to the post-op unit. So I really wanted to understand more about different types of diseases and such. I first wanted to work with pain research, specifically how to anesthetize without or with less opioids, because that is it's been an up and coming research field, at least in the US, but in Sweden, it's not common at all at the same level. So I first wanted to work in a research project with pain research, but that didn't fall out. So at my hospital, there was a new professor who started working there. So through my former supervisor for my master's degree or thesis, she recommended me to stay in touch with this professor because the professor was focusing on post-operative recovery. And we started working together. It was just a part-time job as a research assistant and another type of project that wasn't connected to surgical patients, but it was more about health literacy. So I helped them with one of their studies. And that's ultimately how I got to know the professor. And she's today my main supervisor in my PhD project. So it was like a mix of, my clinical background with networking that ultimately led me to go into research world.
That's very interesting because every person has a very unique path to getting to doing a PhD. Tell us a little bit about academic qualifications you had before you got admitted to the PhD program.
Yeah, sure. So in the Swedish system, in order to be admitted to a doctoral program or as a PhD student, you need to have your bachelor's and then your master's to be qualified. So as I mentioned earlier, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but I got my bachelor's of science in nursing in 2011, and then my specialist degree and master in medical science in 2018. Yeah. And then I started my PhD program in 2021.
Okay.
Yes.
And what about publications? A lot of people ask if you had publications before you got into the PhD program, or even if it's necessary to have publications to get into the program that you did in your institution in Sweden. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so no, I did not have any publications before applying. And as far as I know, that is not required to the programs, not at least in medical field. But it could be obviously a merit, of course, if you've published your master's thesis and so on. But I didn't do that. So there was no requirement of that before applying.
Okay, great. So for people who might want to, explore the possibility of doing a PhD in this specific area in the university that you're doing a PhD in, let's talk a little bit about what the process of applying to your program was like, if you remember. What were the requirements to get into your program, in addition to what you've already talked about?
Well, it's mainly those things, but also writing sending in your CV, a personal letter, and then going through the interview process, which was a two-step process for me, and also a written assignment as well. And the assignment, it wasn't anything complicated. I was supposed to summarize the research field in like 2 pages or 3. And yeah, that was the process for me. The interview process was with the research group and the supervisors who were going to be supervisors in the project, and also a representative from the university as well.
Okay. And when you were applying to the program, did you have to find a supervisor yourself, contact them ahead of time, and then go through your application, or did you apply and you got matched with the supervisor? How does that work?
Yeah, so one thing about the Swedish system, or at least the Swedish system at my uni, is that, I mean, all PhD programs in Sweden are an employment at the university. So we have the protection of, we are seen as employees, even if we are PhD students. So you get a monthly salary and you get all the benefits as other employees do. So for this specific project, it was an employment at university, but also the project was already fully funded for 4 years because it was part, or it is part of a research school. So the supervisors had already got the finance to hire a PhD student. So it was all pretty. There were 4 supervisors, and then they wanted a doctoral student to start the project. So there wasn't any matching process or so on. I think there were like 15 positions available in that specific research school, and this project looked most interesting for me because it was related to my field. And in my cohort, there are a bunch of other projects, people researching long-term opioid use. There's projects about migration health. It's a very mix of different type of projects in the research school.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about the structure of the programs. Once you start the first year, you take courses, do you have special exams to write? How does that work at your institute?
Yeah, so I think every university have their own special rules, but we need to take 30 credits of coursework, and most of the coursework is first and second year, but then you can also choose project specific or research field specific courses after that. And in terms of examinations, there is a half-time seminar that you're supposed to do after 2 years. And what that entails is a half-time report, which is like a comprised thesis where you also summarize what you have done. You have to evaluate how your studies are going and also provide a timeline for everything and so on. And this report is then assessed by 3 external professors who are not connected to your project, because they need to evaluate in a non-biased way. And then you have to kind of defend, it's like a mini defense, what you have done in the 2 years. And you get questions, and then you get passed, or you need to do, maybe you get some recommendations of how to move the project forward. And after that halftime report, if that is, you get green lights and to continue with your timeline and your project, then you just do that. And the next thing is the dissertation defense.
I wanted to ask you a question about your data. So are you collecting data for your thesis, or are you using already collected secondary data?
For this project, it's all it's collected throughout the project. Like, I am collecting the data. But depending on, the project and the topic, some other students may do more database type of projects where they go into, registries to gather their data. But I don't do that. It's with patients or healthy volunteers.
So the halftime report that you have to present and answer questions, is that done before you start working with data, or is that anywhere between, you starting to do the research and then working with the data, bring out your research? Well, where is that exactly at?
Yeah, so I think another thing that kind of maybe is different from other places is that we do research immediately, like the first semester. You're kind of thrown into the project. And some people already have their ethical permits, so they just can go, but I had to together with my supervisor do the whole IRB process, which was very interesting to learn for me, because I didn't have any prior experience with that. So I have gotten the whole process. We had, the study plan, but then we did some tweaks together. It was mainly outlined, the first study at least, and then we did the IRB application together, and then started recruiting patients, and then, all the other steps. So it's basically the whole research process from beginning to end.
Oh, whatever you have at the point of that halftime report, you present and then you get the green light, and so you continue.
Yeah. I mean, the halftime, you're supposed to do it at 2 years, regardless of the outcomes of your project so far. So some people have not come so far, maybe in their research process, due to a lot of, factors beyond their control sometimes, while others maybe already have a publication at their halftime. So it's very depending on your supervisors, your topic, and other factors.
Let's talk a little bit about your personal life associated with the PhD. All of us, when we're going through this journey of doing a PhD, we go through different challenges. What are some of the difficulties that you've encountered since you first started the PhD?
I think my main challenge in the beginning, the first year, was learning to manage my own schedule because I never had that freedom, but also responsibility before. Because at the hospital, everything is pretty cleared out in a structured way, at least your working hours, and rest may not be like that. So that was the main challenge. Like, how am I going to structure my Monday to Friday work? What am I supposed to do? It was a lot of uncertainty, and also it was a new role to transition into. And so I didn't know really what was expected of me in the beginning. And I also struggled during the first year to switch off work, because there were no clear on and off because of you're bossing your own schedule, basically. So that was my biggest issue. I mean, I could in the beginning worked evenings, and I could work on the weekends too, and that is not something I do. I learned to switch off after that first year, so it was a learning process, I think, for me.
How did you get around that? How did you finally decide to not work on the weekends? So what did you incorporate into your life to actually maintain that balance?
There was a lot of factors, I think, that led me to the decision ultimately. Well, first off, I had a lot of consequences from overworking, because I was often exhausted and tired and didn't have energy to do things that I enjoy doing otherwise. I really like, physical training and movement. I didn't have any energy to be active, which was strange. Also, my friends and partner noticed and mentioned that I work all the time. And so my surrounding reacted. And I also took a lot of time, reading through books about, academic work and how to structure your schedule, your work, and attended a few workshops too around that area. So there were a lot of things at the same time that led me to, have my own policy, that I have to develop one, because I don't have one right now, and I don't want to follow anybody else's either, because I need to kind of look to my own needs and what I have, what capacity and resources I have. So I think that was mainly the things that led me to deciding, and also feeling that I have agency over my situation. I have the choice to shut down my computer, but I also have the choice to continue working.
I really like how you mentioned that other people started noticing and sort of telling you that you're always working. I think that kind of input can be very helpful, and people around you, something like that, and kind of give you a nudge saying, hey,
exactly.
Maybe it's time for a break. Okay, so I wanted to ask you a country-specific question. What are some of the challenges associated with pursuing a PhD that are particular to Sweden that you believe should be addressed to ease the lives of PhD students?
For national students with, Swedish citizenship, I think it's fairly straightforward. most of the things. And I think the main problems are in the specific supervisor-student relationship. Maybe people have, there are basically, maybe that's the main problem and not in a systemic way. But for those who are international students who do not have citizenship, there's been a lot of hassle with the migration board regarding their work permits. And that is a systematic problem on a governmental level. I unfortunately do not have all the details myself, but I know a lot of international students who have been experiencing challenges with that and uncertainty about their work permits. So that is what I would say the main problem with this Swedish model.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about, some of the challenges that you experienced during your PhD and challenges within Sweden that PhD students might experience. Let's talk a little bit about some of your positive experiences doing this PhD so far.
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot of positive experiences. I think mainly it's the getting to know a lot of intelligent and fun people in my cohorts, but also people outside my cohorts in, different type of student networking events and learning about their research, which is often very different from mine. And just, I'm a very curious person and I like to learn new things. So that is one of the, most positive things. I also really like that we have a wellness thinking in the Swedish, model. You have the ability to go do some training while you're working. It's like an hour per week. If you're at the office, we have like a gym we can access for free, which is great. There's also classes, workout classes. If you want, you can go there too, which I really like that this way of thinking that movement is important and it's good for not only your well-being, but for relaxing too. And, your focus as well. I mean, that is also a very positive thing.
That's actually really helpful, especially for those who are sitting in one place for a long time, like people who are doing research.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's really good. We have two campuses, one on the north side and one on the south side, and both campuses have a gym that you can access, which is great if you're working at the office or in the lab or, yeah.
All right. Any other positive experiences you wanted to share with us?
I think what I also really like is, as a researcher, you get so many opportunities to present your research in different contexts for clinicians or maybe for the general public or in academic contexts or other type of context. I think that is also one of the most fun things about being a PhD student. I really like presenting about my research, but also getting questions from the audience, seeing their reactions and how people respond to what you're studying. And that also helps to see the importance of your research and that it can benefit, not only to add to the knowledge field, but also to the regular person. So that is one thing that I really enjoy with being a researcher, that you get the opportunity to really talk about your research and teach people about different things. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. There's plenty of positive things that one gets to enjoy during this journey of doing a PhD. I wanted to talk a little bit about your research again. What are some of the existing gaps in your area? So what I mean is, what are some of the topics that a student may work on in the next 3 to 5 years if they choose to complete a PhD or a research project in the same field that you're working in right now?
I think the whole aspect of subjectivity on neurocognitive disorders or neurocognitive reports from the actual patients is still very, very new, especially in perioperative medicine. In aging research, they have more data on that than we do. And so I think we can learn a lot from interdisciplinary projects together or collaborating with each other. So I think that is definitely something that it will be more explored in the next decade. I mean, this is something we knew about in the 90s, but still there hasn't been any research about it, which is maybe not so surprising, but it's interesting how the gap was, discovered a long time ago, but still that no one has been addressing the gap.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next couple of questions I have are most frequently asked questions. A lot of people get these questions over and over. One of the questions is, how do you maintain a balance? Now, I know you mentioned you'd like to work out. What other methods do you incorporate into your day-to-day life to maintain a balance between being a PhD candidate and a human being?
I love that question. I think what has been maybe one of the biggest mindset shifts for me is to connect or reconnect with my values, what makes me feel the most alive, what I deeply care about, and what gives me a sense of purpose. And when I shifted into that mindset, it became much more easier to maintain a more process oriented approach to not only my research but also other things in life, personal life or health wise and so on, because I was a very goal oriented person previously, and even if I met my goals, I never felt fulfilled about them. So something was lacking. So I think shifting into my values has really helped me with being okay and allowing myself to be just as I am without aiming to improve myself all the time, and just be okay with existing as a human being and with all that, what it includes, all different types of emotions or setbacks and mistakes or, difficult thoughts.
I think that's a really good message to stay tuned with your values, because it doesn't matter what level in terms of success you get to. As long as you check in with your value system and you're satisfied with that, you can sort of take a break, be happy with what you've done so far, and then pursue the next goal or whatever you want to achieve next. Wonderful to hear that.
Thank you.
Also noticed that you're a performance coach for academics and researchers. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Is that part of balancing your life and then trying to help?
Yeah, well, it is a job. I mean, it is. I mean, I don't work full time because that wouldn't work, because my PhD position is the full time position. So I do it part time, but it really gives me a sense of purpose with the coaching. So of course it takes some energy too, but one of the things that gives me a recharge of energy is to coach people and to support them and to help them. So I definitely, it's a part of the wheel, the balancing wheel for me.
All right. The next most frequently asked question is, what is one PhD myth that you would like to debunk today?
That you have to overwork yourself to become successful. I think that is a myth. I think we can work in an effective manner and without overworking ourselves until exhaustion to become successful, whatever that means. Is it to have a publication, or is it to pass your dissertation defense? So that is, I think that is a myth that needs to be debunked.
It's kind of hustle culture. What is one advice you would give to future and current PhD students?
I think it's to have more fun when you're doing your PhD and not follow this type of culture, hustling culture, because that is not really sustainable, I think, for your health or well-being. And try to maintain activities that you're doing just for yourself to have fun, hobbies or socializing, because that will definitely help you to cope with the challenges a lot better than if you just remove them entirely and just work.
I think that's a very good advice. I've tried that. There was a phase in my life where I was completely just working. It was great. It created a lot of quick outputs, quick achievements, and quick satisfaction, but it's really hard to sustain it long term. So finding a way to maintain a balance, work, but also attend to other things in your life, take time to breathe. If you find a way to do that early on, then it becomes a lot easier to keep doing that long term and keep producing those outputs. So that's really good advice. Thank you for sharing that, Anahita. Anything else that you would like to share with the audience? Anything about your experience or what you've learned that you would like to give to people as knowledge?
Yeah, I think one thing that I think is important to have in the back of your mind is to be bold enough to ask questions to senior researchers, especially if there's something you want to learn from them, or also if you want to collaborate with someone, take the chance. I mean, it's a very temporary time that you're a PhD student, and if you want and you have the energy and capacity and resources, there's always worth asking, either for help or for collaboration or so on, because we learn a lot in that process. And the worst case scenario is just that they will say, no, I don't have the time. And then you move on to the next person. So I think that is something that has been helpful for me in my own journey, to ask for help when I need help, but also if I find, researchers that I network with, ask for collaborations if I am interested and I feel that it will develop me as a researcher and also help my own projects in the process.
All right. Thank you so much, Anahita, for sharing that information and leaving us with great advice. It was really lovely chatting with you and listening to all your experiences and your work.
Thank you so much.
Wishing you all the best with the remaining course of the program. And thank you once again for being here with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Madara. I really appreciate you inviting me here, and it's been lovely to talk with you. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you everyone for being here with us today. I hope you found this episode helpful. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye.